Hello everyone and welcome to my review for Jujutsu Kaisen chapter 223. As always, if you haven't already, definitely be sure to like and subscribe. I like to try and hit at least 100 likes in this week's review. Now then, without any further ado, let's get right into this week's chapter because it's really important. You know, it's the start of that big fight we've been building up to since chapter 3 overtly, arguably chapter 2, since that was when Gojo and Sukuna first fought each other, even though it was only a little tiny scuffle. And, you know, Sukuna was only at like 5% of his power. Now it's happening. And the excessively long title of this chapter calls it The Decisive Battle. Now, the way things are going now, it doesn't seem like this is going to be the final battle. Which I guess is going to show that, yeah, Sukuna is not the main villain. He is the biggest villain of the series, but the main villain, the main antagonist, the one who's most responsible for moving the plot along, is Kenjaku. So I guess the actual final battle is going to be against him, which is neat. It's also interesting, well, you know, unless he does something insane, which is always a possibility. Final battle not actually against the strongest antagonist character. That's you know, that's kind of a neat little thing, I suppose. Anywho, I kind of want to make this review a little quick, so I'm not going to go over every single thing in the chapter, but I am going to go over the big important stuff. So, one big important thing, all of the higher-ups are dead. Except Gakuganji, I guess, though he's technically more of a subservient to the higher-ups, and Gojo doesn't seem to be super worked up by the fact that Gakuganji is the one that killed Yaga, because he views him as being someone who's the embodiment of a person just following orders. And also the fact that he didn't tell the higher-ups about Yaga's knowledge of how to create cursed puppets like Panda shows that he's changed in some way, which is, you know, not something we would expect from this guy. But who killed all the higher-ups? My initial thought was that, oh, it was Gojo, because, you know, he's sick of putting up with these guys. He just went and murked all of them. However, some people did point out that last chapter we saw Yuta and Inumaki going through some place that was sort of lit up like the HQ is, so maybe they did. I don't know if Gojo would tell his students to go perform a hit for him, so I have no idea. There's also the possibility that it was just Kenjaku because he was done using them, but Kenjaku generally doesn't seem like the type of person to throw out his resources when they're no longer useful to him. He just doesn't play with his toys anymore. He doesn't throw them out. He's just like, whatever. I mean, shit, Chozo's still alive, so when he's done with them, he's just kind of like, yeah, whatever. So I don't think Kenjaku would have done it. The big culprits right now are Yuta and Gojo, but ultimately I don't think it really matters who did it. It's just kind of, you know, they're dead. I also think the implication that Gojo says here, maybe if you were at the head of HQ, things would be a bit better. I think it's slightly different from what I originally interpreted it to mean. Like, hey, maybe if you were actually physically there when that happened, things would have went different. But clearly it's more, you know, if you, a person who is willing to change and make compromises on certain things or in charge of the higher-ups, maybe they wouldn't be such stupid assholes, who are now all dead. Anywho, we get a bit of a montage of stuff happening. We have Ijichi casting a barrier for Gojo to seemingly sort of hide his cursed energy's presence or his intent a bit. And the barrier activation is really cool. We get a nice internal monologue from Ijichi about how Gojo is the strongest person in the world and he trusts him, so he's not going to let him down. Then we get something really important, something we've been waiting for a really long time. It's Utahime's curse technique, Solo Prohibition Zone. It's a buff AoE. She can buff other people's and her own curse technique reserve and output. That makes sense as to why her being at the front lines in Shibuya was, like, not a great idea. I guess it also makes sense as to why she needed to prepare her technique, because it's more efficient when performed with various ritual aspects, which is not something we've gone over a ton in the series. Most of the techniques, our characters are just able to kind of do them. I guess really the only exception would kind of be like Granny Ogami's technique. For the most part. Oh, and I guess Ino. Ino needs his ski mask. That's a component that he needs. But for the most part, the only real extent we've seen is like hand signs for specific techniques and domain expansions. But here, a lot of curse techniques seem to work like Kido in Bleach, where there's incantations, hand signs, dances that normally are required to bring out the full power of the technique. But the better you are at Jujutsu, the less you need to do. The mastery of Jujutsu is the mastery of subtraction. The more competent you are at sorcery, the less you have to do to bring out the full power of your techniques. However, in a situation like this, Utahime omits nothing, because while she's already competent enough at using her technique to not normally require all of these things, she does everything. She even has Gakuganji playing music in order to make it as powerful as it can be, more powerful than it usually is. She's able to achieve 120% of its normal effect. So the starting strategy here, and I don't know why people are shitting on Gojo for this, is we're going to buff Gojo as much as physically possible. Now, people are like, it's kind of like a not good sign for Gojo, gotta buff yourself to fight Sukuna. Not looking good, and then you're talking shit. I'm sorry, but they're trying to fucking kill this guy. When you're trying to kill someone who's really dangerous, why do you give a fuck about, not doing everything in your power to have the best chance at doing it? Anyway, this Gojo that we're seeing here is the strongest Gojo we will ever see, because he is being buffed beyond his usual power. His output, which can already get pretty crazy, is going to be even higher. And then Gojo starts saying the incantation for his technique, as he releases a 200% output Hollow Purple. A great looking spread. Then we had another spread of Sukuna detecting it, trying to block it or stop it somehow, as we see it's deleting city blocks. Now, first thing, this section of the review's being recorded at like the other half of the day, because basically as soon as that last segment ended, I had to deal with people the rest of the day. So now I'm back here now, like 9 hours later. So some person on Twitter somehow managed to figure out where Gojo and Sukuna were during this scene, and managed to calculate that Hollow Purple traveled like 4 kilometers. JJK doesn't have a ton of, like, numbers for the scaling in it, so I guess that's just kind of usually left up to the fans to do. In that case, that's definitely one of the most impressive feats we've seen thus far. We never really got an idea of how far Hollow Purple's range was during the Goodwill event. We just kind of knew it was big. So crazy to have a number on that, to see how far it can go and how big the attack is. Now somehow Sukuna survives this. Even though this barrier was preventing him from detecting Gojo's output. Like, he was able to tell where Gojo was, but he wasn't able to tell that he had launched an attack until it was almost upon him. How did he survive it? I have no fucking idea. I don't know. Because the way Hollow Purple was explained to work in the past, it seemed like it just kind of disintegrated matter. Just deleted stuff, effectively. So as for how he did that, your guess is as good as mine. Maybe it gets an explanation, maybe it doesn't, I don't know. I mean, he managed to take off Sukuna's hand, which is not a small feat. You know, there are not very many people that have done that. Let's see. Yeah, none. There are none. I think that is the most damage anyone's ever actually done to Sukuna in a fight before. Yeah, it was a sneak attack, but who said we're going to be fighting clean? Who said we were going to be doing that? I mean, Gojo doesn't really care about being honorable or any of that stuff. He just wants to beat Sukuna. And the same goes for Sukuna. Do you think he cares about fighting fairly? He wants to fucking win. I just don't imagine him, like, getting interference from other people, because why would he feel the need to stoop to that level? He thinks he's the strongest creature on Earth. He might be. But, you know, why would he care? He thinks he's invincible. Why would he bother doing that? So, you know, these two are going to do whatever they're going to do. But what may be the most hype aspect of this chapter is the notion of who is the challenger here. These two guys have both been proclaimed to be the strongest. Sukuna was the top dog back in the Heian era. No one ever beat him. In the modern era, prior to the events of the story, and, you know, arguably up until 10 chapters ago, Gojo was unquestionably the strongest character. There was no one who could even challenge him in terms of power. His only defeat ever came from before he managed to unlock the full capabilities of his curse technique and his power as a sorcerer. You know, it was back when he was a rookie, when he was a kid. Now that he's in his prime, no one can touch Gojo. Like, literally. Unless he deactivates his technique or it's forcefully deactivated, but then, you know, he's still the strongest sorcerer alive. So now, it's time to find out, 1, who is actually the strongest sorcerer, and 2, who is the challenger here. Because when you have two guys who are supposedly the strongest and who, in their primes, have never been beaten, who's the challenger when they fight each other? Is it the returning champ from the past, who just up and left one day? Or is it the reigning undefeated champion who's never been beaten? Who is the challenger? Well, according to Gojo, since he managed to draw first blood on Sukuna, and presumably since Sukuna is invading his era, Sukuna is the challenger. He is the one challenging Gojo for the #1 spot, which, to be fair, narratively, I think he is, because it's just kind of always been a constant that Gojo is the strongest. Like, that has just been the law of the world. Gojo's top dog. He's #1. So, Sukuna coming along, trying to usurp him, he is the challenger here. It reminds me of the fight between Yujiro and Kakukayo in Baki, when he says, you're mistaken here. I think you're misunderstanding the situation. Martial arts isn't challenging strength. Strength is challenging martial arts. You are challenging me. Which is a very bold thing to say to the guy who's, like, uncontested top of the verse. Of course, this fight we're seeing right here before our very eyes is the contest to see who's top of the verse. Who will end up coming out on top? I don't know. Narratively, probably Sukuna. Probably Sukuna, because Gojo's not going to revolve the Sukuna plotline. Sukuna is Yuji's problem. Even if he's not in Yuji's body anymore, he was his problem for the first 212 chapters of the series. So, you know, Yuji's got to be the one to resolve that in some manner. However he's going to go about doing that, I'm not sure yet. It's probably going to have something to do with that body swapping thing. It's possible he'll try to take Sukuna back into his own body or something. I don't know if Gojo will straight up lose, but I imagine, Sukuna's going to be pulling out some shit we've never seen before. We're going to get an explanation of what the fire technique was. What was he opening? It's probably his tattoos. He probably stores techniques in those. What did Yorozu give him? That's probably going to be a big game changer, because I don't think there would have been any way for Gojo to know about that. If there's records of what Sukuna's technique was and his capabilities from the past, Gojo could have learned about that if there were records. Whatever Yorozu made, there's probably not any records of. It is a new thing. We're, of course, also going to have to see how Gojo's able to stack up against Maharaga and the other stuff from Ten Shadows. And what other stuff does Gojo have in his arsenal? Because we've only ever really seen him pull out, 3 or 4 moves and then his domain expansion? What else, if anything, is Gojo capable of? We have never really seen him in a truly serious fight, just a straight-up 1v1. Because in Shibuya, that was a trap laid for him, fighting a bunch of people who were weaker than him. What happens when Gojo fights someone who is on par with him? We're gonna have to wait and find out. But with that, that's all I've got for this week's review. If you guys enjoyed, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that notification bell so you don't miss any of my uploads. I do Jujutsu Kaisen chapter reactions and reviews every week that we get a new chapter. If you enjoy discussing Jujutsu Kaisen with other people, or you just enjoy the content I produce on this channel, I highly suggest you check out my Discord server. I have a link to that down in the description. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys around. Take care.